The problem that we are talking about is that we are afraid for these kids' futures. So
how would you be afraid of their future?
We're afraid for their futures.
But what could happen to the child when they grow up?
Well, what we're looking at in the next few decades, to the end of the century, is a worldwide famine. Mass displacement of people, famine, food shortages across the world as a result of drought in the places where we grow food around the world and how we feed ourselves.
Okay, so
we're also looking at mass displacement of people. We're talking 5 to 6 billion refugees as a result of climate change, both within our countries and from around the world.
So you think if you have a baby and that baby grows up, they're not going to have anything to eat because climate change will cause massive droughts and food shortages. Do you really believe we're not going to have any food in a couple years because of climate change?
Not in a couple of years, no, in a few decades to the end of the century.
Okay. Because for decades, people on the left or in the media have been predicting, you know, the polar ice caps are going to melt. Remember, Al Gore said they'd be melted by now. And, you know, in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, they all said that, you know, the Earth was going to end and there were going to be, you know, the Manhattan was going to be swimming and it was going to sink. These things have never happened. What makes you so sure they will if everyone's been wrong before?
I'm not going to contest with you about the predictions around ecological breakdown. You should just go and look up the science yourself.
Well, I have. I mean, the science isn't always right. I mean, the scientists said Y2K.
The scientists now have consensus around this.
Well, there was a consensus that Y2K was also going to melt down the entire world.
Do you even have a family?
I do.
Do you have a wife? Do you have children?
Yes, I have children, yes.
Well, are you worried about them? Are you worried about their futures?
No, I think they're going to be great. I don't think they're going to starve. I think they're going to have plenty to eat.
I look forward to 20, 30 years' time when that's the case. I really hope that you're right.
Well, I mean, I think I am right, and I just don't believe the science because it's not all there.
Because you've been told not to believe the science by your government.
No.
You've been told to not believe the science by your government.
Do you remember?
And now you've not believed it because it suits you. Because you live in a Western country where things aren't happening in your country just yet, except for the forest fires that happen in California, except for the other things that are happening as a result of climate change.
Do you remember when all the scientists?
So you can just continue to
Do you remember when all the
ignore
scientists thought that the world was the center of the universe?
Of what's happening?
Blythe.
But it's coming for us all.
Blythe, do you remember when all the scientists said that the Earth was the center of the universe? There was scientific consensus about the geocentric theory. Well, it was wrong. It was wrong. Y2K was wrong. Germ theory was wrong. There's been a lot of errors in the scientific community. And what happens if you have a kid that solves the climate crisis? You'd be denying the world.
We haven't got time. We haven't got time for that.
Maybe your son or daughter could become a Nobel Peace-winning scientist and get us all off fossil fuels. Why would you deny the world that chance?
Have you not listened to anything that people are telling you?
I'm listening. I'm just not believing.
Well, it's a problem of belief then, isn't it?
Okay. Well, maybe belief, maybe gullibility. But Blythe, I wish you well. And do you fly, by the way? Do you drive?
I've stopped flying now.
Do you drive?
I do drive a bit.
Okay. Because that's, you know, that's going to kill us all too. So you might want to start walking.
Don't put it on the individual. This is down to corporations and down to governments like yours ignoring telling the truth about it.
You put it on the individual yourself.
No,
by not
I haven't put it on the individual.
Children.
I've made a decision because I'm afraid for the child that I would bring into the world.
Okay.
This isn't an antinatalist movement.
Okay. Well, I gotta go. Blythe, I respect your belief.
No, you don't. Because if you respected my belief, you would actually go and have a look for yourself.
Okay. Well, I looked before the segment. I just disagreed. But we can have a difference of opinion. Thank you very much.
We can, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Menschen hungern, Menschen frieren, Menschen sterben. Wir sind in einer Klimakatastrophe. Und alles, wovor ihr Angst habt, sind Tomatensuppe oder Kartoffelbrei in einem Gemälde. Wisst ihr, wovor ich Angst habe? Davor, dass die Wissenschaft sagt, dass wir 2050 unsere Familien nicht werden ernähren können. Braucht es Kartoffelbrei auf einem Gemälde, damit ihr zuhört? Dieses Gemälde wird nichts mehr wert sein, wenn wir uns um Essen streiten müssen. Wann ist der Punkt erreicht, an dem ihr hinhört? Wann ist der Punkt erreicht, an dem ihr hinhört und nicht einfach so weitermacht?
Activists spray-painted windows of a luxury department store.
What are you doing?
The Just Stop Oil organization released video of some of its members spray-painting London retailer Harrods on October 20th, but why a department store?
Investment group that owns Harrods also have shares in oil and gas companies.
London's Metropolitan Police Force says 2 people were arrested on suspicion of criminal damage. During the Harrods demonstration, other protesters blocked traffic, with some people reportedly gluing themselves to the pavement. Just Stop Oil uses the motto, "Together we can demand change, no new oil and gas projects." They plan daily action outside 10 Downing Street, the home of the UK's Prime Minister. The day after the Harrods protest, an 80-year-old woman, identified by Just Stop Oil as Reverend Sue Parfitt of Christian Climate Action, was arrested after blocking traffic in her folding chair.
I'm doing this because we are on the brink of the greatest catastrophe that human beings have ever known. And the government and the public have to wake up to it. The government's in extreme dereliction of its duty in not explaining the facts of climate change and climate crisis to the public.
More protests can be expected from Just Stop Oil. The organization wrote on Twitter, "The disruption will end when the government ends new oil and gas." For Inside Edition Digital, I'm TC Newman.
In the words of the king, the science is clear. The demands are simple. Just stop oil. It's a piece of cake. It's time for action. Ladies and gentlemen, in the words...
Now, one of the great challenges today is that we often feel untouched by the problems of others and by global issues like climate change, even when we could easily do something to help. Giving people access to data most often leaves them feeling overwhelmed and disconnected. And this is where art can make a difference. Art does not show people what to do, yet engaging with a good work of art can connect you to your senses, body and mind. Keeping this in mind, activists have time and again used art to create awareness about the consequences of climate crisis. In the latest climate change, protesters threw soup over Vincent van Gogh's painting named Sunflowers at London's National Gallery. The incident took place on Friday when the 2 activists of Just Stop Oil campaign poured 2 cans of tomato soup over the famous painting. Wearing the T-shirts bearing the name of the group, the 2 activists, after pouring the soup on the painting, glued themselves to a wall.
What is worth more, art or life? Is it worth more than food? Worth more than justice? Are you more concerned about the protection of a painting or the protection of our planet and people? The cost of living crisis is part of the cost of oil crisis. Fuel is unaffordable to millions of cold, hungry families. They can't even afford to heat a tin of soup.
On the other hand, the gallery say the incident had caused minor damage to the frame, but the painting was unharmed as it was protected by glass. Meanwhile, the police have said that the 2 women have been arrested for criminal damage to the frame of Van Gogh's Sunflowers painting. The protest is the latest by the group's activists, and this comes after days in which they blocked roads around Parliament and government departments in a bid to halt all new oil and gas projects of the United Kingdom government. While this is not the only incident where the group has targeted famous artwork, in June, 2 activists glued themselves to a frame of a Vincent van Gogh's Peach Trees in Blossom painting at a courtyard or in a gallery in London. While in July, members of the group glued their hands to a frame holding a copy of Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper at London's Royal Academy of Art, and to the frame of J.M.W. Turner painting at Manchester Art Gallery. Moreover, these are not the only incidents where climate activist groups have targeted famous artwork. Earlier this week, 2 Extinction Rebellion activists glued their hands to a Pablo Picasso painting in Melbourne, Australia. The activists wanted to convey the connection between the consequences of climate change and human suffering. They stood with their hands stuck to the protective covering of Picasso's Massacre in Korea, with a banner reading, "Climate chaos equals war plus famine," on the floor in front of them at the National Gallery of Victoria. And for more on this, we were earlier joined by Nyombi Morris, a climate activist and an ambassador of United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. And this is what he had to say.
I would like to collect the word that I saw a lot of complaint on social media when people were saying this wasn't the right act. But for me, I'm so happy to my fellow activists that at least after that act, they are now being given attention. One, people are pretending they are not looking at the women who are sharing their message. They are looking at the backside. This painting wasn't damaged. They just painted it and it can be cleaned. But look at the message what these 2 young ladies are sharing. And for so long, climate activists have been demanding for climate justices. Media has ignored us. The people have ignored us. The policymakers have ignored us. But we are talking about the skyrocketing prices of gas in Europe. We are talking about the global warming. We are talking about the rising temperature. We are talking about the floods that killed over 1,500 people in Pakistan. So this is all linked to fossil fuels. And the mission wasn't to target the art. No, the mission was to target those things that they are giving attention, and those are the art. So I support it because that's the only way we can be happy.
Security.
What is worth more, art or life? Is it worth more than food? Worth more than justice? Are you more concerned about the protection of a painting or the protection of our planet and people? The cost of living crisis is part of the cost of oil crisis. Fuel is unaffordable to millions of cold, hungry families. They can't even afford to heat a tin of soup. Meanwhile, crops are failing. Millions of people are dying in monsoons, wildfires and severe drought. We cannot afford new oil and gas. It is going to take everything.
Fuck you! Fuck you, you fucking white copper! Fuck you, you ugly piece of shit! You look like the guy with teeth knocked out, you fucking fascist! Nobody knows who you are and nobody cares, and you will die alone! You will die alone and you will burn in hell!
Fuck you!
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words. And yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear. How dare you continue to look away and come here saying that you are doing enough when the politics and solutions needed are still nowhere in sight? You say you hear us and that you understand the urgency. But no matter how sad and angry I am, I do not want to believe that. Because if you really understood the situation and still kept on failing to act, then you would be evil, and that I refuse to believe. There is no planet B. There is no planet blah. Blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. This is not about some expensive, politically correct green act of bunny hugging or blah, blah, blah. Build back better. Blah, blah, blah. Green economy. Blah, blah, blah. Net zero by 2050. Blah, blah, blah. Net zero. Blah, blah, blah. Climate neutral. Blah, blah, blah. Our hopes and dreams drown in their empty words and promises. Of course, we need constructive dialogue, but they've now had 30 years of blah, 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 and where has that led us? Over 50% of all our CO2 emissions have occurred since 1990, and a third since 2005. If this is what they consider to be climate action, then we don't want it. They invite cherry-picked young people to meetings like this to pretend that they are listening to us. But they are not. They are clearly not listening to us. And they never have. Just look at the numbers. Just look at the statistics. The emissions are still rising. The science doesn't lie.
People seem to see me as an angry teenager who condemns every individual's behavior, which is kind of funny to me.
And you're not that person?
No.
What's the difference between that person and who you really are?
There's a big difference. Yeah, I'm not an angry teenager. I probably don't take life seriously enough, like in private. Yeah.
Do you find it weird then that you have this reputation for being as you?
It is really funny, actually.
But you find it funny because why? It just seems so untrue to you.
Yeah. And I think the people I care about, who I meet, they know that it's not me. And if I meet people personally, they can see that I'm not angry.
While locking in policies of further destruction for decades to come. You promise to not let future generations down while creating new loopholes, basing your pledges on the cheating tactics that got us into this mess in the first place. If the commitment of lowering all our emissions by 70, 68 or even 55% by 2030 actually meant they aimed to reduce the emissions on that level, that would be a great start. But that is unfortunately not the case. And since the general level of public awareness continues to be so low, our leaders can still get away with almost anything. No one is held accountable. It's like a game, Whoever is best at packaging and selling their message wins. As it is now, we can have as many meetings and summits as we want, but unless we treat the climate and ecological emergency like an emergency, no sufficient changes will be achieved. What we need, to begin with, is to implement annual binding carbon budgets based on the current best available science. And right now, more than ever, we are desperate for hope. But what is hope? For me, hope is not more empty assurances that everything will be alright, that things are being taken care of and that we don't need to worry. For me, hope is the feeling that keeps you going, even though all odds may be against you. For me, hope comes from action, not just words. And for me, hope is telling it like it is, no matter how difficult or uncomfortable that may be. And again, I'm not telling you what to do. After all, safeguarding future living conditions and preserving life on Earth as we know it is voluntary. The choice is yours to make. But I can assure you this: you cannot negotiate with physics. And your children and grandchildren will hold you accountable for the choices that you make. How's that for a deal?